Hey everyone. Uh, did you know that there's like this hidden epidemic that's affecting our kids?
Hmm.
It's pretty scary stuff when you think about it. We
Mm.
were talking about high blood pressure,
Right.
hypertension,
Hmm.
and it can have consequences that last into adulthood.
Yeah.
You know, I had no idea how serious this was until I started going through all this research, like
Hmm.
medical journals, research papers. We're talking about big names here,
Hmm.
like JAMA, the Indian Journal of
Oh,
Pediatrics,
wow.
even the Lancet. And you know what they're finding? Is seriously eye-opening. So today's deep dive is all about giving you the information you need to understand childhood hypertension.
Right.
So we need to understand what causes it.
Yeah.
What are the risks?
Yeah.
What can we do about it?
Hmm.
Some of the things I found are pretty mind-blowing. Like, did you know that there are genetic conditions that can actually cause high blood pressure?
Oh, what?
Or that a baby's birth weight can be linked to their blood pressure years later? It
Hmm.
really makes you think. What are your initial thoughts on all this?
Yeah. You know, it is true. Childhood hypertension is a serious issue,
Right.
and it's one that can set the stage for lifelong problems if
Right.
we don't catch it early.
Exactly.
But there is good news here.
Okay.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
The more we understand this, the better we can protect our kids.
I love that. Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit.
Okay.
How widespread is this? The research paints a pretty alarming picture of childhood hypertension on the rise.
Yeah.
What are we seeing in the numbers?
You're right to be concerned.
Okay.
Studies from the Indian Journal of Pediatrics and JAMA, among others, show a pretty significant jump in cases over the past few decades.
Wow.
It's not just a local thing either.
Right.
This is a global trend,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it even more concerning.
But here's the thing. Hypertension in kids is often silent.
Right.
You don't see those obvious symptoms, like headaches or dizziness that some adults experience.
Yeah.
So how do we even know if it's a problem?
That's why those regular blood pressure checks at the pediatrician are so important.
Yeah.
The American Academy of Pediatrics really stresses this.
Okay.
Every single well child visit,
Yeah,
check that blood pressure. It's our best bet for catching this early.
I like that. So what's at the root of all of this? Is it just bad luck?
Right.
Are there specific things that make a child more likely to develop hypertension?
It's rarely ever simple.
Yeah.
The research points to a mix of factors:
Okay.
genetics, environment, even lifestyle.
Hmm.
We can't ignore the role of genes.
Mm-hmm.
Certain conditions like distal renal tubular acidosis or Bartter syndrome
Mm-hmm.
can directly affect how a child's body regulates blood pressure.
Wow, those sound pretty intense. Can you break those down a bit?
Yeah.
They're not exactly household names.
Right. Distal renal tubular acidosis
Okay.
messes with the kidney's ability to balance the acid levels in the blood.
Okay.
This imbalance ends up leading to high blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got Bartter syndrome, which throws off the kidney's ability to reabsorb salt. Low potassium levels, high blood pressure, it's all connected.
Okay, so genetics definitely plays a role, but what about the environment
Hmm.
and lifestyle choices? Where do those fit in?
Well, think about it. A child's environment, even before they're born, can have a huge impact on their health.
Wow.
Take prematurity and low birth weight,
Hmm.
for example.
Yeah.
There's research,
Okay.
including a study on renal growth in preterm infants from the Indian Journal of Pediatrics.
Okay.
It shows that these factors can actually increase a child's risk of developing hypertension later in life.
Hold on. So something that happens in the womb
Yeah.
can affect blood pressure years down the line.
Exactly. It's called fetal programming.
Got
Think of it this way. Any stress during pregnancy,
Yeah.
like if the mom has hypertension,
Mm-hmm.
nutritional deficiencies
Right.
can actually change how the baby's organs develop.
Wow.
And this can set the stage for problems later on, including hypertension.
That's pretty heavy.
It is.
What are the day-to-day stuff? You know, diet, exercise,
Yeah.
all that good stuff. Do those things play a role too?
Absolutely. We know there's a strong connection between obesity and hypertension
Okay.
in both adults and kids.
Right.
And it's not just weight.
Right.
The foods we eat, how active we are, even how much sleep we get.
Yeah.
All of these things contribute to our overall heart health.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, a study in the Lancet found a higher incidence of hypertension
Mm-hmm.
in kids who were small for gestational age.
Right.
So it's a very complex interplay of factors.
So childhood hypertension isn't like a simple equation, right?
Yeah.
It's not just genetics. It's a mix of things. Some we can control, some we can't.
Exactly. And that's why understanding these different pieces is so important. It helps us spot the kids who might be at higher risk so we can intervene early.
Speaking of early intervention, let's talk about actually detecting this.
Yeah.
and screening for it.
Hmm.
We know it's often a silent problem in kids.
Hmm.
So how do we catch it before it becomes a bigger issue?
Well, those regular blood pressure checks are our first line of defense, like we talked about. Remember the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines?
Yeah.
But there's another tool in our arsenal that is super useful:
Okay.
ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, or ABPM.
Okay, break that down for me.
Yeah,
What is ABPM and how does it work?
it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
ABPM involves having the child wear a portable device
Okay.
that automatically records their blood pressure at regular intervals throughout the day and night.
Wow.
This gives us a way more complete picture of their blood pressure patterns than a single reading in the doctor's office can.
So it's like a 204/7 blood pressure diary.
Yes.
That's really cool. When would you actually use this?
Yeah.
Is it for every kid?
Not necessarily for everyone. It's especially helpful in cases where a child has consistently high readings in the office.
Okay.
Even if they're technically below the hypertension threshold,
Okay.
ABPM can help us rule out white coat hypertension, where a child's blood pressure only spikes up because they're anxious in a medical setting.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about kids who are already diagnosed with hypertension? What are the treatment options there?
Treatment for childhood hypertension is multifaceted.
Okay.
Lifestyle changes are always the first line of defense.
Right.
Think healthy eating, regular exercise, enough sleep.
Mm-hmm.
The research is clear these things matter.
Right. But what about medication?
Yeah.
Is that ever used for kids?
In some cases,
Okay.
if those lifestyle changes alone aren't enough to get a child's blood pressure under control,
Right.
then medication might be necessary.
Cool.
There are actually several different types of blood pressure medications available,
Okay.
like ACE inhibitors,
Yeah.
ARBs, calcium channel blockers, and diuretics.
Wow. So there's a whole range of options.
Here is.
How do doctors choose the right one for a specific child?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
The choice depends on a bunch of factors: the child's age, how severe their hypertension is, any other health conditions they might have. It's all part of the equation.
And I bet race and ethnicity play a role too, right?
Absolutely.
I vaguely remember reading something about how African-American children might respond differently to some medications.
You're absolutely right. Studies have shown that African American children may not respond as well to ACE inhibitors
Okay.
compared to kids of other races.
Wow.
This highlights the importance of what's called personalized medicine,
Okay.
where we consider a child's individual characteristics when we're making decisions about their treatment.
So we've covered the prevalence,
Mm-hmm.
the causes,
Mm,
the screening, even the treatment.
right.
But what about the long-term impact?
Yeah.
What happens if hypertension in a child goes untreated? What are we looking at down the road?
That's a critical question.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the research paints a pretty bleak picture.
Oh, no.
Untreated hypertension can have serious long-term consequences for a child's health.
Right. We're talking heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, and the list goes on.
And these consequences don't just magically disappear when a child becomes an adult, right?
Exactly. Childhood hypertension is a major risk factor for developing heart disease as an adult.
Wow.
So by addressing it early on, we're not just putting out a fire today.
Right.
We're potentially preventing a lifetime of health issues.
So we're really talking about changing a child's entire health trajectory.
We are.
But before we wrap up this section, I want to touch on prevention. What can we do to stop childhood hypertension from developing in the first place?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
It all circles back to those lifestyle factors we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Creating a healthy environment for kids, both in the womb and as they grow up, is key.
Right.
That means encouraging good eating habits,
Yeah.
making sure they're physically active, and helping them get enough sleep.
And of course, prenatal care is crucial too.
Absolutely.
What happens during pregnancy matters. It does.
Yeah.
Managing any health conditions the mother might have during pregnancy, things like hypertension or gestational diabetes, can drastically reduce the child's risk of developing high blood pressure later on.
So it's not just about healthy kids, it's about healthy families.
Exactly.
It's a team effort.
It is. Prevention starts at home and it starts early.
Mm-hmm.
But it's bigger than that, too.
Okay.
It takes a community, a supportive system to really make a difference.
So we've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much to unpack. You know what? There's a whole other layer to this we haven't even touched on yet.
I know what you're thinking.
Okay.
And it's something that often gets overlooked when we talk about health. Ready to dive deeper.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting. It's like we've been focusing on like the physical stuff,
Right.
the nuts and bolts of blood pressure.
Yeah.
But what about the mind?
Mm. Mm.
Emotions?
Yeah.
Do those play a role in this whole hypertension thing?
It's a fantastic question, and you're right, it's often missed. But the research is starting to show just how intertwined our mental and physical health really are.
Okay.
We're finding that chronic stress, anxiety, even feeling lonely,
Hmm.
can contribute to high blood pressure even in kids.
Wow.
It's a lot for those little bodies to handle,
Right.
especially with all the pressure they face these days. I mean,
Yeah.
think about it, school, social media bullying.
Right.
It never stops.
It is constant, isn't it? Like a nonstop barrage of stuff
It is.
coming at them.
Mm.
And their bodies are still growing,
Right.
still learning how to cope.
Exactly.
So are we saying that a child's emotional state can actually impact their blood pressure?
The research seems to think so. It all comes down to hormones.
Okay.
Those chemical messengers in our bodies, how
Yeah.
our brains respond to stress. That fight or flight feeling.
Yeah.
When a child is constantly stressed,
Mm.
their body's basically stuck in that mode,
Right.
and their blood pressure stays elevated. Over time, this can really damage their cardiovascular system.
So it's more than just, telling kids to eat their veggies and get some exercise.
Right.
We need to create a supportive environment for them.
Exactly.
One that nurtures their emotional well-being
Mm,
as much as their physical health.
you got it.
But that has to feel like a huge task for parents.
It can.
Right.
It can feel overwhelming. But even small changes can make a big difference.
Okay.
Start by opening the lines of communication.
Okay.
Encourage your kids to talk about what's bothering them, what they're worried about. Create a safe space for them to express those feelings without judgment.
That sense of connection,
Yes.
of belonging,
Mm-hmm.
so important.
It is.
But what about the bigger picture? Are there specific groups of children
Yeah,
who are even more vulnerable to this combination
definitely.
of stress and hypertension?
Think about children from disadvantaged backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
those facing tough socioeconomic challenges. They're often dealing with higher levels of stress due to things like poverty, not having enough food, even exposure to violence.
Right.
And sadly, these same factors can increase their risk of developing hypertension. It's a vicious cycle.
It is. Social inequalities lead to both stress and high blood pressure.
Yeah.
And then these things perpetuate more health disparities. It's heartbreaking.
It is, and it's a powerful reminder that health isn't just about individual choices.
Right.
It's deeply connected to the conditions in which people live, their social determinants of health,
Yeah.
where they're born, how they grow up, their work, their environment. All of these things play a role.
That's such an important point.
It is.
It challenges us to think beyond just medical treatments
Yeah.
and Band-Aid solutions.
Exactly.
We need a more holistic approach,
Right.
one that tackles the root causes of these problems,
Right.
the social and economic factors that contribute to this hidden epidemic.
Absolutely. It's about creating a society that supports every child's well-being, regardless of where they come from or what challenges they face. That's the real goal.
Well said.
Wow.
Okay, before we move on, I want to touch on something that's super relevant in our tech-obsessed world.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that too much screen time is linked to a bunch of problems for kids, like obesity, sleep issues.
Right.
But is there a direct connection between all that tech and hypertension?
It's definitely a new area of research,
Yeah.
but the evidence is starting to point in that direction.
Okay.
Think about it. Hours spent glued to a screen often means less time being active. Plus, all that stimulating content can trigger the release of stress hormones, and guess what? That can elevate blood pressure.
So it's like their little bodies are constantly on high alert, even when they're just playing a game or scrolling through TikTok.
It can be, yeah.
What can we do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Are we raising a generation of kids with high blood pressure who are hooked on technology?
No, not necessarily. It all comes down to finding a balance. Teaching kids how to use technology responsibly. We need to encourage them to engage in offline activities, set limits on screen time, maybe create tech-free zones in the house.
Right.
It's about setting boundaries.
I love that. Reclaiming those moments of unstructured play,
Yes.
having face-to-face interactions,
Yes.
getting out into nature.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things that really nourish a child. Mind, body, and soul.
You got it. Those experiences not only build physical and emotional health,
Right.
but they help kids develop resilience, creativity, social skills, all of the ingredients they need to live a happy and fulfilling life.
Okay, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here.
I have.
But before we get to our big takeaways, is there anything else you want to add about childhood hypertension? Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I think we've done a good job of exploring this very complex issue.
Hmm.
But if I had to leave everyone with one overarching message, it would be this.
Okay.
Childhood hypertension is serious,
Hmm.
but key, it is often preventable and treatable.
Okay.
That's the good news.
Knowledge is power, as
Oh.
they say. The more we understand this, the better equipped we are to take action.
Exactly, and that's what it all comes down to,
The-
action.
Right.
By understanding the causes, the risk factors, the potential consequences,
Hmm.
we're empowered to make informed choices that can protect our children's health.
So it's call to action
Yeah.
for parents, caregivers, healthcare providers,
Yeah.
everyone involved in a child's life.
Right.
We need to be vigilant,
Absolutely.
proactive, and informed.
Absolutely. It's about working together to make a real difference in children's lives
Yeah?
and ensure that they have the healthiest future possible.
All right, so we've dug deep into the research,
We have.
explored the complexities, uncovered some surprising truths about childhood hypertension. But now I'm curious, what's your take on all this?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, listener? What resonates most with you? We've talked about the physical factors, the emotional side of things, even the role of technology. But there's one more piece of the puzzle I want us to consider,
I think I know where you're going with this. Uh-huh.
and it's something that often gets lost in the conversation.
Ready to connect the dots. This is where it gets really interesting. Okay, so we've talked about genetics, environment, lifestyle,
Right.
even those tricky emotional factors.
Yeah.
But what about like the bigger picture,
Mhm.
the long-term impact of all of this? What happens if we don't catch childhood hypertension early?
Right.
What are the consequences down the road?
That's where it gets really serious.
Yeah.
Untreated hypertension in childhood
Right.
can have like a ripple effect
Yeah.
that impacts a person's health for their entire life.
Wow.
It's not just about managing blood pressure today, it's about preventing a whole cascade of problems in the future.
Okay, so paint that picture for me. What are we talking about specifically?
Okay.
What long-term risks are we looking at?
Well, first you have to understand that high blood pressure puts a constant strain on the entire cardiovascular system.
Okay.
The heart, the blood vessels, everything.
Right.
Over time, this relentless pressure can damage those delicate tissues.
Leading to a whole host of problems.
So it's like wear and tear on the body's plumbing.
It is.
What are some of the specific consequences of this?
Let's start with the heart.
Okay.
One of the most common effects of prolonged hypertension is something called left ventricular hypertrophy,
Okay.
or LVH for short.
Okay.
It's a mouthful, I know.
It is.
But basically it means the walls of the heart's main pumping chamber become thickened.
Thickened so the heart muscle gets bigger.
Exactly.
Okay.
And while you might think, hey, bigger muscles are a good thing, right?
Right.
In this case, it's not.
Okay.
A thickened heart muscle has to work harder to pump blood,
Right.
and this extra effort can eventually lead to heart failure.
Heart failure, sounds terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the heart muscle itself.
Okay.
Hypertension can also damage the arteries
Right.
that supply blood to the heart,
Mm-hmm.
increasing the risk of coronary artery disease and heart attacks down the line.
So the heart takes a big hit.
It does.
What about the kidneys? We know those are important for, filtering waste and keeping everything running smoothly.
Right.
How are they affected by high blood pressure?
The kidneys are amazing organs,
Yeah.
but they're also very delicate.
Okay.
High blood pressure can damage the tiny blood vessels within the kidneys,
Right.
impairing their ability to filter waste products effectively.
Wow.
And when the kidneys can't do their job properly,
Yeah.
we're talking about chronic kidney disease,
Okay.
a very serious condition that can ultimately require dialysis or even a kidney transplant.
Wow, so it's like a double whammy.
It is.
Hypertension can damage both the heart and the kidneys.
Exactly.
What about the brain?
Yeah.
We haven't talked about that yet.
The brain is particularly vulnerable to the effects of high blood pressure.
Okay.
Think of it this way. The brain needs a constant supply of oxygen-rich blood to function properly,
Right.
but hypertension can damage the blood vessels in the brain,
Mm-hmm.
making them narrower and weaker.
Okay.
This increases the risk of stroke, which occurs when blood flow to a part of the brain is interrupted.
Stroke, that's a scary thought.
It is.
Yeah.
A stroke can cause permanent brain damage and disability,
Wow.
depending on the severity and the location of the blockage.
Right.
And it's not just stroke.
Okay.
Prolonged hypertension can also contribute to cognitive decline and dementia later in life.
Okay. So we've talked about the heart, the kidneys, the brain,
Right.
all vital organs taking a hit from uncontrolled high blood pressure.
Yeah.
But what about the blood vessels themselves?
Yeah.
Aren't they affected by this constant strain too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Remember, high blood pressure puts a constant stress on the walls of the arteries.
Right.
Over time, this can weaken and damage the arteries,
Mm-hmm.
making them more prone to a buildup of plaque.
Okay.
You know, that fatty substance that can clog the arteries.
Right.
This process is called atherosclerosis,
Okay.
and it can restrict blood flow throughout the body, leading to a whole host of problems.
So it's like a domino effect.
It is.
One thing leads to another,
Yeah,
and the damage just spreads.
exactly. That's why it's so crucial to address hypertension early on.
Right?
We want to stop that domino effect before it even starts.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
It has.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
It does.
We often think of high blood pressure as an adult problem,
Right.
but it's clear that it can have profound consequences for children,
It can.
shaping their health trajectory for their entire lives.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that childhood isn't just a carefree time for play.
Right?
It's a critical period for laying the foundation for lifelong health.
Yeah.
The choices we make, the environments we create for our children, even the healthcare decisions we make
Mm-hmm.
can have a ripple effect that lasts for decades.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
What kind of legacy are we leaving for future generations?
Right.
Are we doing enough to protect their health and well-being?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? And I think it all comes back to awareness education and a collective commitment to creating a world where every child has the opportunity to thrive.
Well said. And listener, we hope this deep dive has empowered you with the knowledge to make informed choices for yourself and your loved ones.
Yes.
Remember, even small changes can make a big difference.
They can.
By prioritizing healthy habits, being mindful of the risks, and seeking medical advice when needed, you can play an active role in shaping a healthier future for all of us.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay well.